Hi everybody, this is Crystal. So today I'm going to show you how to make the bean stitch bag. Now these are just some stuff that I hang from my bag for decoration. I always do that to all my bags. In addition to what I say that you need, if you are going to need a button. This is an 1.5 inch button, and you're going to need a magnetic clasp. I'll show you that here. That's what holds it together, that magnetic clasp right there. Now that button on top is not functional. It just hides the underneath of the metal clasp. That's it. It's just sewed around the metal clasp so you can't see it from the top. So it's really just kind of a decorative piece. It clasps by this magnetic clasp right here, just like that. And like I said, those are just decorations. It's intermediate pattern probably. If you can do the puff stitches, you'll be able to do the bean stitch. Oh, and also I mentioned what kind of yarn you would need in the beginning. This is all that I have left of that skein of yarn. So whenever you see what kind of yarn I'm showing you, this is all that I have left. So you might want to take that into consideration depending on how you crochet. But that's all that I have left of my one skein of yarn that I used. But I made it by the skin of my teeth, so let's go ahead and get started on this. Okay, for this project, I am using the Big Twist Rainbow Classic yarns. This is from Joanne's, and it's 100% acrylic, and it is classified as a bulky 5. I think it's more like 4, but you could use any bulky 5 or any 4-weight. Either one would work just fine. And there's 447 yards, and that would be. And the color I'm using is called Fun Brights. And remember, you don't have to use this brand. Any 4-weight or bulky 5 will work. And then I'm going to be using a size J, which is a 6mm crochet hook. Okay, I just want to take a second to ask you not to forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you look in the description box of this video or any of my videos, you'll see an auto-subscribe link. Just go ahead and click on that and you'll automatically be subscribed and you'll never miss any of my updates. So you want to start out with a chain of 80. Now what we're going to do is work from the bottom of the bag up. So we're going to work from the bottom of the bag all the way up, and then at the end we will sew the bag together at the bottom. So once you get your chain of 80 done, we're going to follow it down without twisting your chain, and we're going to slip stitch into that very first stitch to form one large ring, and then we're going to chain 1. Now we're going to go right back into the same spot that we slip stitched into and do a single crochet. Now I'm going to work 1 single crochet in every single stitch all the way around my big ring until I get back to the beginning. Now remember, it's going to stay open the whole time until we get finished, and then we'll sew it together at the bottom. So we're working from the bottom up, 1 single in every stitch until you get back around to your starting point. Just like that. Okay, once you make it back to all the way around, at the end, this will be the round 1, you should have 80 stitches. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and end with the slip stitch right there into our first single crochet. We're not going to go into this chain 1 that's right here, but the first single crochet, we're going to go ahead and slip stitch. 80 stitches. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1. And we're going to work our first bean stitch or our puff stitch right here into the same spot that we just slip stitched into. So this hole right here. Now this is how we make the puff stitch or the bean stitch. So that chain 1 we did doesn't count as a stitch. Okay, it doesn't count as anything. So without yarning over, we're going to go into that same stitch and draw up a loop. So just like that. Now we're going to yarn over and go into the same spot 3 more times. So yarn over, go into the same spot and draw up a loop 3 times. So that's 1. Yarn over, go into the same spot, that's 2. Yarn over, go into the same spot, that's 3. Now you should have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 loops on your hook. You want to yarn over and go through all 8 loops and then chain 1 to lock it. So that's how you do the little bean stitch puff. So we're going to skip 1 stitch and we're going to work that again into the next stitch. So remember, we're going to skip 1. We don't yarn over the first time. We just go straight in. So skip this one and go into the next without yarning over and draw up a loop. Now we're going to yarn over. We're going to yarn over, go into the same stitch and draw up a loop 3 times. So that's 1, 2, and 3. You'll have 8 loops on your hook. Yarn over and go through all 8 and then chain 1. Again, we're going to skip 1 stitch and work our puff into the next. Without yarning over, skip this one and go into the next stitch and draw up a loop. Now we're going to yarn over and go into the same stitch and draw up a loop 3 times. So that's 1, 2, and 3. 8 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through all 8 and chain 1. And that's what it kind of starts to look like. Again, skip 1 stitch. Now we don't, without yarning over, go into the next and draw up a loop. Now we're going to yarn over, go into the same stitch and draw up a loop 3 times. So that's 1, 2, and 3. 8 loops, yarn over, go through all 8 and chain 1. So I'm going to repeat that all the way around until I get back to the beginning. Skip 1 and puff, or do our puff bean into the next. Chain 1. Skip 1 and puff bean into the next. Then we're going to go ahead and repeat this pattern all the way around until you get back over here to your starting point. Okay, I come to the end of round 2 and I just did my last puff and I have 1 stitch left to skip. Now I want to slip stitch into the side of this very first puff stitch. So right there, see it? Go ahead and go right into it and slip stitch, and that's going to end the round and you'll have 40 puffs. Now round 3 is the repeat round for the rest of the bag. So what we do is chain 1 and turn our work. Now we go right back into the same spot that we slip stitched into and we work our puff. So go right into it and draw up a loop. Remember, we do not yarn over that first time. And now we yarn over and go in, draw up a loop 3 more times. So that's 1, 2, and 3. 8 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through all 8 and chain 1. Now we're going to go into the next spot. Now we do not go into the chain 1 spaces. We go into the side of the puffs. You can see it if you pull them apart right there. Every puff has one. See them? All the way down. That's the spot that we work in. So we're just going to go right into this side of this puff stitch right here. Do not yarn over that first time. By not yarning over, that's what's creating that side stitch right there. So it's very important not to yarn over that first time. Go right into it and draw up a loop. And then we yarn over and go in and draw up a loop 3 more times. So that's 1, 2, 3, 8 loops, yarn over and go through all 8 and chain 1. Again, right here in the side stitch, you can see it really well. Don't yarn over, go in, draw up a loop, and now we're going to yarn over and go into the same spot and draw up a loop 3 times more. There's 1, 2, and 3. 8 loops, yarn over, go through all 3 chain 1, and we're just going to keep repeating this, going into the side of the puff here. Sometimes you just have to pull it apart to find it. So I'm going to repeat this all the way around until I get back to the beginning. Just like that. And that's kind of what it starts to look like. They kind of look diagonal from each other. They're supposed to look like that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this until I get back to my starting point. Okay, I've made it all the way to the end of round 3, and we're going to end with the slip stitch in the side of this puff stitch right here. So sometimes you got to dig around a little bit here on it, but right there. So go ahead and slip stitch right into the side of it. 40 puffs, and now we're just going to repeat round 3 again. So we just chain 1 and we turn our work. So we turn our work every round now, and then we go right back into the side of this puff where we just slip stitch into and do our little puff again. So go right into it, draw up a loop, and then yarn over and go back in, draw up a loop 3 more times. 1, 2, and 3. 8 loops, yarn over, go through all 8, and chain 1. Now we're going to go into the side of every puff again, working a puff. So we're just repeating what we did the round before. And that's all we're going to do until we get our bag as tall as we want it to be. You should always have 40 puffs at the end of every row, and remember to turn your work. That's what keeps the puffs looking diagonal, or kind of catty corner looking, by turning your work. So you got to make sure you do that. So I'm just going to continue working rows of puffs like we've been doing. Oops. Remember, we're working on the sides of each puff. I'm not sure how many rows I'm going to do, so I'm going to continue working, and I'll let you know here in just a second how many total rows I do. Okay, I went ahead and done, counting that, if you count that very first row of single crochet, and then all my puff rows, I've done 23 rows. So single crochet was 1, and then plus 22 rows of puffs for a total of 23 rows. You can make yours wider if you want, you know, that's whatever you want, it's up to you. So I just ended my row like normal. I slip stitched there in the side of that puff. So now I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. And now we're going to work the flap, like I said. So we're going to work 18 puff stitches across, just like we normally do. So we go right back into that first one, and we make our first puff there, just like we've been doing. Only thing we're going to do is just make 18 across, so the same way we've been making them. And go to your next spot here and do your puff. And then chain 1, and then your next spot here where we on the side of the puff, make your puff. So I'm just going to go ahead and work my 18 puffs across, and then I'll turn the camera back on and I'll show you what we're going to do after we do that. So I got 3 puffs there, and I want a total of 18. Okay, I have made it across, and I've done 18 puffs. Now what I'm going to do after my 18th puff, I just did the puff, instead of chaining 1, we're going to chain 2 this time. So 1, 2, and then we're going to turn our work. Now we're going to work across again in the same manner that we've been working in. We're going to start right here in the side of this puff here. Instead of going kind of like back in the very first like we did earlier, we're going to start in the side of this puff right here and work our puff. Chain 1, and then the next puff right here on the side of it. Chain 1, and then the next puff right here into the side of it, just like we've been doing. So I'm just going to do this all the way across here until we get to the end of the row. Okay, I'm coming to the end of the row. And here is my last stitch of this from the previous row. I want to make I just did a puff here and I chained 1. I want to make my last puff in the side of this puff stitch. So just go right into it, the side of it like that. Don't have to be perfect, just kind of grab that side there if you can. And make your last puff of that row. Like that. And you'll have 18 puffs at the end of that row. Chain 2 again and turn. Now we're going to do the same thing again. Work across. We're just going to repeat the previous row. So start right here with your first puff. And then your next puff. Just like that. So we're just going to repeat the previous row all the way over here until we get to the end. Okay, I am coming to the end of row 3 of the flap, because here's 1, 2, 3. I just did my last puff. Now again, your last puff is going to go kind of right here on the side of this last puff from the previous row. So here's the chain 2 that we did. I kind of just pull it out and then you can see right where you need to put your last puff, right there into that spot. $18 puffs still. Go ahead and chain 2 at the end here and turn your work and repeat her again. Same thing. So we're just going to repeat this row. Just like this. You should have 18 puffs when you get to the end. Okay, I went ahead and did 10 rows for the flap. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 rows. There's 18 puffs at the end of every row. Now, at the end of my 10th row on my flap, I just secured that last bean puff with the chain 1, and now I'm just going to tie this off like that, and then I'll just hide that tail. Now we're going to sew the bottom together. So if there's a side that you like better, you can flip it to whatever side you like best. Flip it right side out. They both look completely the same to me. Let me see. I think anyway, so doesn't really matter to me. Oops. Okay, so once you figure out which side you like better, I think make it where the right side's facing you. Now what you have to do, this is the right side, this is the one that you want to show. We're going to sew the bottom up. Now you need to make sure that it is really equal here. There should be about 1 puff hanging over, you know, on each side here. You see this 1 puff here, and then this 1 puff here. Make sure you get it really as even as you can, and then you sew it together down here once it's even. Now you can sew it together with a yarn needle if you want. You can single crochet it together. I'm actually going to slip stitch mine together. So I got it exactly how I want it. It's well, not completely equal, but pretty much equal, the best I could get it. So I'm going to flip it over, and all I'm going to do is slip stitch my bottom part together. So I'm just going to go through a stitch on this side and a stitch on the other side, and I'm going to start my yarn, and I'm going to chain 1. Now I'm going to go into the next stitch here on this side and the next stitch on the back side and do a slip stitch, and then the next stitch here, and then the next stitch on the back side and do a slip stitch. I'm going to do this all the way down. The next stitch here, and then the next stitch on the back side and slip stitch. And I'm just going to do this until my bag is completely sewed up. And remember, you can use a yarn needle. Sometimes I use a yarn needle. I just slip stitching it this time. Doesn't really matter. Whatever it works for you, as long as the bottom gets sewed up so we don't lose everything out of our bag. Just like that. So I'm going to continue slip stitching it together until I get to the end of my row. Okay, I've slip stitched all the way across. I'm just going to clip my yarn and tie that off. Okay, so now the bottom of our bag is sewed shut. I think it stayed pretty even. Yeah, on both sides there. Okay, I still got to hide a bunch of tails, but I'm going to go ahead and make a handle, and I'm just going to make a simple single crochet handle. You can make any type of handle that you want. I just don't have tons of yarn left, so you can even buy a handle. But go ahead and leave a long tail to start. That way we can sew the handle on at the end. Leave a 18 inches or so. Now remember, the handle is up to you. You do not have to do it like me. But I'm just going to do a chain, let's see, of 7. You can make yours wider or thinner, it's up to you. But I'm going to single crochet in the second stitch from the hook, and then I'm going to work 1 single crochet in every stitch across. And you'll have 6 stitches now. Now I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. I'm going to go back into this very first stitch here. Single crochet, and then 1 single crochet in every stitch across. Six stitches again, and that's what we're going to do. We're just going to keep repeating that. Chain 1 and turn. Start out with the 1 single crochet into the very first stitch. 1 single crochet every stitch across. Six stitches, chain 1 and turn, and repeat. And I'm just going to keep doing this until I get my handle as long as I want it to be. So I'm not quite sure how many rows I'm going to do for my handle, but I'll let you know how many I do here in just 1 second. Okay, now I did 124 rows for my handle. You do as many as you want, but once you get as long as you want, leave a long tail on the other end too when you tie off. That way we can sew it onto our bag. So go ahead and grab one end of your tails, and we'll get it on. We're going to use our yarn needle to sew it on. So get your bag right size facing you, and I'm just going to sew it. Get it on here right along this edge here. You can go down just a little bit, about a row or so, and basically I just grab it and I just kind of neatly sew it the best that I can back and forth through the handle and then back through the bag. You can go through the puff stitch too if you want, it's fine. You just want to make sure that it doesn't fall off your bag. So you might have to go back and forth a couple times. right here's where our flap starts. That's just kind of where I started sewing it, right on the, right where the flap starts, just the row right by there, and I just go right across. And I'll just sew it a couple times back and forth, just so it's on there nice and strong. And then I will hide my tails, and I'm going to do the other handle the same way. So I'm going to finish this one up, hide my tails, and then I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same thing. But remember, when you're doing the other side, make sure you untwist your handle. So when you come over here, that it's not twisted up when you sew it on. So you want it to be nice and non-twisted. So kind of like that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish sewing mine on. Okay, so I got my handle sewed on there. Now what I'm going to do is put my magnetic clasp. Now this is something you don't have to do. I mean, you can carry around just like this if you want. So the thing with the magnetic clasp is you can see the other underside, like when I put it on here and I fold the tips down like you're supposed to, you're going to be able to see them. So that's why you have to have a button to sew on over the top of it. Now the button will not be functional, but the clasp will be underneath the button. So it'll make it seem functional, I guess, or appear functional. So you just kind of, they're really easy to apply. I probably need a pair of pliers. I'm going to try to wing it without a pair of pliers. So I just try to find the center. Let me pull my camera down a bit. Okay, I just try to find the center of my flap, and you can count over your puffs. 1, 2. So right here is the center of my flap. And then you want to line up your button too. So right about here is where I want to put it. Like I said, I just eyeball it. Now you stick your bottom piece under like this. And then all you do is just fold these tabs over. These ones are pretty easy to fold. Some of them you might need pliers, but that's it. You can't see the tab really well in the puffs, but you can see it well enough that I'm going to sew a button over it. Now what you want to do is take your bottom part of your magnetic piece. It really doesn't matter which one's on top or bottom. And you want to line it up to where it's going to clasp with it. So you see right here, fold your piece down, find where your magnetic button's at, right here. So that's where I want to put this. So I'm just going to stick this here, flip it over, and I'm going to just pull my tabs, push them out like that, and then it's hooked. So now you have a magnetic clasp there, just like that. Now what I'm going to do is sew my button right on top of it, so you won't, like I said, I mean, you can see it a little bit through the puffs. Not bad. I mean, if you moved them around, you probably wouldn't even need anything. But I'm going to do it anyways, because some clasps are different than that, and you'll really be able to see them, especially if you use a different stitch than the puff stitch. This is a way you can hide it. So I'm going to go ahead and just sew this button on right over the top of this clasp here real quick. Okay, there it is. That's all there is to it. I strung some buttons, or I'm sorry, a little necklace I had that someone gave me, some beads that someone gave me, and then I had this keychain. I always like to string up my bags with beads and stuff. Makes them look, kind of makes them your own. But that's it. That's all there is to it. The button's on here. Remember, it's not functional, but it hides that magnetic button that's underneath it. So it opens and shuts with the magnetic button. And you can't even tell the magnetic button's there because this button hides it. So I hope you enjoyed my tutorial. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to check me out on Facebook also. I'll put a link below to that in the description box. And check out all my other tutorials. I have hundreds of them. So until next time, have a good day.